So welcome everyone to this week's meeting of the Tacoma Pierce County Coalition to End Homelessness. We do now have about 30 folks in the room and it's 9:01. So why don't we go ahead and get started with today's meeting. Rosemary, would you like to kick us off?
Thank you, Rob. I welcome everybody to our open table where we listen to one another, learn from each other with respect, and take up this ongoing challenge of ending homelessness in Pierce County. We acknowledge our debt to the continuing shepherding of this earth by Native peoples of the Salish Sea, especially our residents of the Puyallup tribe of Indians. Yesterday marked the beginning of a nationally established month called Hispanic Heritage Month. I don't know if you all knew this, but it is this month. Originally, it was a week of celebration established in 1968 and then made into law as a month-long celebration in 1988. Governments tend to like to do those sorts of things, but this is an important way to acknowledge people's contributions as well. The month honors the contributions of the people who describe themselves as having Mexican, Mexican-American, Chicano, Puerto Rican, Cuban, or, quote, another Hispanic, Latino, or Spanish origin. A very diverse community that's sometimes lumped together in various and unhappy ways. The date in the middle of September was chosen to commemorate the independence of 5 Central Latin American countries: Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua. They all declared their independence from Spain in 1821 on September 15th. So that's a little historical nugget you might not have known by this middle of the month kind of program. But during this month, all kinds of public events commemorate the complex history of colonialism, independence, immigration, civil rights actions, and the history and accomplishments of this diverse community. Now, today, I want to just call out the work of Tacoma Centro Latino, now called Mi Centro, who works with Latinx and Indigenous Native families, offering free ESL classes, domestic violence and sexual assault advocacy, bilingual therapy services, specializing in a variety of traumas, and provide parenting and family and home support. So an important social service resource for our community. And starting as Centro Latino, the organization served the Latino community through Catholic Community Services in 1983. In 1990, it became its own organization, and today is the primary liaison between the Latino and Indigenous communities and a lot of state and local agencies, so helping to make that transition more smooth for people who need to deal with them. So this month has lots of opportunities locally that you might pay attention to, and I encourage you to participate in any that you have the opportunity to do. In relating this work to our work of housing advocacy, I think often of the work of Dolores Huerta, most known for her efforts with Cesar Chavez to establish and maintain the Farm Workers Union. And a little context for today. I was trying to think about what to say this morning, but I was feeling somewhat defeated as I witnessed the trauma of homelessness on our overcrowded street encampment every day. And when visible public responses tend toward sweeps, removals, and bans, when we need a gigantic emergency stable housing program. These things take time, I know, but I was feeling pretty impatient and without many creative thoughts. And then wanting to draw attention to Hispanic Heritage Month, I thought again and quickly about the gift of Dolores Huerta. She started only with a burning desire for justice for those who harvest our food and worked with others to secure protections and living improvements for multitudes of workers in the face of harassment, violence, frequent political backlash, and I'm sure a few days of feeling defeated. I've been both chastised and encouraged by a few words she said that I've kept as a reminder, and I want to leave these with you today as a way to center ourselves as we share our time and resources on the streets and lobby our governments for permanent housing solutions. Here's her sharing her vision and a little practical advice. We must use our lives, she says, to make the world a better place to live, not just to acquire things. That's what we were put on earth for. Every moment is an organizing opportunity. Every person, a potential activist. Every minute, a chance to change the world. If you haven't forgiven yourself something, how can you forgive others? And finally, she says, if people don't vote, everything stays the same. So that's my encouragement from Dolores Huerta for the morning, and I welcome you all to our ongoing work. So with that, just a reminder for those of you who are new and for those who may forget sometimes, we do ask that you use for Zoom the hand feature when you would like to be recognized to speak, that you put on keep yourself muted at all times when you're not speaking, and that you stop the video of yourself if you're doing other activities that might be distracting to those of us looking at all of our lovely square faces, or square boxes anyway. And also something that may not happen in other groups you're in that much is we use the chat as an ongoing conversation during the meeting. So this is an active place. It's important for us. We keep this as a record. And so it's a wonderful compendium of ideas that people have in the day, and people can put contact information in there. You can find a lot of resources that way. And if you don't know how to retrieve the chat or save it, send me a message and I'll make sure that we mention that as well in the somewhere today anyway. There are other norms that Rob usually posts here that you can look to see if you've come in after he posted them. You might not see them, but we have norms for conversation that basically we ask us to respect one another as we speak and not to take up too much time. And put things in the chat rather than say things again if you have already spoken one or more times is very helpful for making sure everyone has a chance. So I see some folks who may be new here, or maybe I'm just not remembering. So we take a little bit of time now just to ask new folks to say hello, tell us your name, and if you're with an organization, so we can know how to reach out to you in our own work to make sure we can collaborate where possible. It's not a time for a long discussion of the work you do. We love to hear from people who have agencies that they like to describe, and we welcome those kinds of presentations as actual formal presentations. So anybody new here, just raise your hand and Rob or I will recognize you and say hello and what group you may be with or what activities you're involved in. Shawanda.
Good morning. I graduated from Evergreen State College, and I heard about your organization from a professor and a student. So thank you for the invitation. And I'm just here to learn and
thank
see
you
what
for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Jan.
Good morning, I'm Jan Burrell with 501 Commons, and we're delighted to be working on capacity building services for organizations trying to address the homeless crisis. So thanks for having us here today.
So wonderful to have you, Jan. Thank you very much for coming.
And I see Sam has his hand up as well.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Sam Hampton. I'm with Jan. With 501 Commons, I'm the Director of Management, Consulting and Services, and we will be providing capacity building resources for homeless service providers in Pierce County. So I'm glad to be here, and I'm here to learn and to meet everyone and to find out more about what you all are doing.
Wonderful, Sam. Thank you so much for joining us today. Blanca.
Hello, everyone. My name is Blanca Sagastizado, and I work for the Franklin Pierce School District Family Resource Center. I'm the Family Resource Navigator, and this is my second time here. And because I have so many families in our community that need housing, so I just need to learn, and I'm so glad that I'm in this space. So thank you for having me here.
Thank you, Blanca. This is a great resource, and we look forward to learning from you about the needs you're learning about too. Well, Rob, I'll give it back to you. I think that's it.
All right. And if anybody else didn't have a chance to introduce themselves, you can still do that in the chat. So it's great to see everyone. And I got to say, this is the first meeting in a while where I've seen a complete screen full of cameras on. So it's great to see everybody. So let's get started with our regular first item of every meeting after Rosemary's fantastic introduction. And that is to talk about what's happening on the streets this week. So the purpose of this section of the meeting is to allow folks who are doing outreach, whether individuals or from service providers, to share what changes they're seeing on the streets, what changing needs there are, and how the folks in this room might be able to help fill those needs. So feel free to either physically raise your hand or use the raise hand function, and I'll call on folks as they raise their hands. And now I'll stop talking. We'll start with Jeffrey.
Good morning, everyone. I haven't had a chance to get out too often, but in this last week, I did find a new encampment on one of the side streets from Tacoma Mall Boulevard down, I can't even think of the cross street right now. A couple of RVs, a tent in the road, that kind of thing. Seeing a lot of RVs just scattered everywhere. And it's kind of interesting that this is just getting a little more ridiculous with just scattering all the homeless people. I'm trying to think. The project down on 35th and Pacific still seems to be going on, and a lot of heavy equipment, and it looks like it's going to be a pretty intense operation there, not just a regular low barrier tent camp. So we'll see how this all plays out. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeffrey. Teresa.
Jan, I'm going to ask you to chime in. I just have a couple words of intro. I think you know what I'm going to talk about. We have a woman in our community here who's in a wheelchair, who's just a tiny little human being who keeps landing on the pavement. And many of us have tried to intervene in one way or another. And Verna and Jan were out with me on Wednesday, and I'd like Jan to tell you what was so frustrating about that.
Great. Her name, well, she is Native American, not Puyallup. She is in a wheelchair secondary to an injury of several years ago. She weighs maybe 90 pounds at the most. We have seen her off and on the streets for several weeks now. We have called, I know 911 has been called at least once. We found her Wednesday with her head in the gutter, literally in the gutter on 15th, which is a busy street. She was alert enough to refuse attention from us, although Verna, gave her oranges and snacks, and she took them and sat up at that point. I have a list of 6 different agencies that I call as resources. Nobody answered the phone. That's Teresa's point. So it's one thing to go out to the street and do outreach. And I can tell you that an orange only goes so far, right? She has a lot of identifiable barriers. She's tribal, but not Puyallup. She is mentally ill to some extent, but not unable to, she can respond to person, place, time, and all that. So she's in the medical world, she's alert enough to what we would assume be responsible for her choices. And it is tough. Anna, take it away.
I experienced something just yesterday afternoon. I was working in the office with Inside Passages, and I left in the afternoon and I went to Tacoma Housing Authority, and I met up with Michelle and her supervisor Amber to hand off some paperwork. And from there I was heading down MLK to take my usual, 19th Avenue. This is right by St. Joe's. And there was a gentleman almost at the intersection. He was passed out on the curb. And what's happened is that everybody was just driving by and ignoring this. Even an ambulance, I waved to the ambulance, and it wasn't an ambulance with their lights on or anything like that. They were just driving right by this guy. And there was a guy on foot wanting to just pass the street, just go through the crosswalk. And he passes right by this guy. He's on the curb sidewalk. And so I'm pulled over at the gas station there at that intersection, and I called 911. And the interaction, I'm glad it was recorded, because the interaction with the dispatch operator before passing me on to, fire and rescue, they were asking if this guy was sleeping or if he's unconscious. Does he look like he's alive? And I said, I see respiration. I see his stomach going up and down. So he's breathing. And they said, did you actually wake him up? And asked if he needs help. There was a lot of emphasis on, does he actually want any help? Lots of questions. 3 times, do they want help? Ma'am, there's a lot of homeless there that are sleeping. I said, I realize this, but this guy is unresponsive. So they said, we're going to send a unit on the way, and just wave them down. And it was just kind of appalling. It was kind of appalling, but it was very sad, the lack of humanity. And they did respond. And it was interesting how everything was orchestrated between the 2 or 3 that were responding to him. They go automatically to the leather coat he was wearing on a warm day yesterday. They raise the sleeve, and they're checking for discharge bans or any kind of allergies. And he was discharged apparently on the 13th, yesterday being the 15th. And he probably walked from St. Joe's. He's been in the neighborhood. A woman approached from the fish cafe and told the paramedics he's been there throughout the day with a bottle. He's just, been like this all day. But it was very dismissive, and it was very unfortunate, very sad this happened.
This is speaking to a larger problem, and everything that's been put in the chat, I called on Wednesday. So all of your suggestions are great. I've called. Our problem is that our social service and our resources are absolutely overwhelmed themselves with low, we don't have enough staff. Is there anybody in the room that feels that they have enough staff to get their job done? So no, I mean, that includes our police force, that includes our fire departments, that includes every one of the ideas that you put out. Yes, I have called all those people. And I've had great success in the past with all of those agencies. I think that we're reaching yet another perfect storm whereby not only is the rate of homelessness, specifically unsheltered homelessness, going up, but the employment and staffing situation is now straining what were traditional and even our newer partners. I think there's just not enough help out there. So that's the perception I'm getting. I'm glad for all these suggestions. It's that they can't do enough either. Jay.
At this point, with the drastic number increase on the homeless that we've seen strictly this summer alone in the last 2 months, like if we pull up all the data that I've been given so far and build a map out of it, which I'm halfway through, we can see that our homeless groups in downtown have tripled and scattered because of the sweeps. So we no longer have accurate information. We no longer have accurate numbers. It's changing every day. And our destitute ones that are at the very bottom that are super sick are no longer able to get their services that they require. And the services that we can provide are getting so stretched thin that we are also having a hard time as providers working with each other and covering enough surface and having enough provisions. And at this point, we're so busy trying to help each other that we don't have the opportunity to answer the phone. And that's what Jan's seeing. And as this progresses in a couple of months, we're just not going to have the resources that we need for the situation.
Well, thank you for bringing this to our attention and raising it up. I think it points out the challenge we're going to face with wet and wintry weather coming far too soon. And it also provides fodder for the outreach that I'm hoping all of us in this room will do to our local elected officials. We'll talk about that a little later in the hour. But it's clear that there's a lot of need and not enough resources for folks right now. So any last on the streets items before we move on to the next item? Dion.
Hi, I'm working from home today, so I'm keeping my camera off. I had my first experience witnessing what we'll call a sweep this week. It happened right outside of St. Vincent de Paul over on Madison. It's at the cross street is 56. It's been adequately posted for almost 2 weeks now, but what was notable is knowing that we are, a human services agency. I had on the 13th, the day of the posted notice, 10 people come in and ask for assistance getting moved or having, gas to move their vehicles, luggage to pack their belongings in. Not a single one of them had the opportunity to access shelter after they were offered it last week. I went out onto the street several times and there was not an outreach worker out there. There was some police assisting in removing cars. What was interesting is after all of that, and after we helped several people get their vehicles moved, on the 14th, the day after the posted notice, we did have a great outreach response. Lots of people out there offering assistance, talking about shelter. But what I noticed was most people left on the 13th, which was the day of the posted notice. They were afraid that their cars were going to get towed. They were afraid that their belongings were going to get picked up. And they were coming into us saying, what do I do? I was offered shelter last week and I don't know who to call and I don't know where to go. And I didn't have an answer for them. I have outreach contacts with the HEART team, but I had the wrong ones. I didn't even know which team was responding right outside of our store. So it was an interesting experience to just witness what was happening and kind of what the disconnect was and what could have been a really coordinated experience, because we're right there to offer services. But it wasn't as great as it could have been. And a lot of people left before they could access the shelter that they would have probably taken. So, I just encourage anybody who has not gone out and seen what a sweep is like to actually go experience it.
Thank you for sharing that, Dion. And just to close out this section, Garrett, do you happen to have a sense of how many shelter spaces are currently empty?
Essentially no congregate spaces are empty, and so there are beds available for women at the Rescue Mission, men and women at Nativity House, and men at Shiloh Baptist. All three are congregate, and some space at the Beacon Young Adult and Coffee Oasis Youth shelters, and almost always veteran beds available in Ording in Roosevelt Barracks.
Yeah. I just always like to remind, it's good to remind myself at least that there just simply is not enough shelter. If everyone agreed to take it, there simply is not enough shelter to serve everyone who's currently homeless in the county by multitudes.
Yeah, and we operate about 96% bed utilization. So when I say there's beds available, it's a very small number in our whole system, right? So 1,300 beds around there and using very few. So probably another 400 beds in the queue to open in the next 6 months, but also some challenges in maintaining funding for a lot of our existing beds that are funded with temporary funding sources. So did some depressing math on that yesterday. So that's some challenges for us on the operations side.
Thank you, Garrett. And then somebody with on a phone, you have your hand up. Your phone number is 5552 at the end. We'll close out our on the street section with your comment.
Hi, this is Sarah from the downtown Tacoma Rescue Mission campus. I just wanted to give a quick update that we have revamped our women's shelter beds to where there's a little bit more privacy. It's a 4-bunk method where everyone has their own, so it's stairs leading up to the top, so not like the old school bunk beds. Everyone has their own little closet and nook, plugins and things like that to build a little bit more privacy amongst the ladies in the shelter. I just wanted to give that heads up. So now our capacity for the women's shelter is going to be 64 total beds for the ladies moving forward.
Thank you for that update and perspective. All right, so it will surprise no one that we're behind on today's agenda already, but I do want to move on to our community spotlight and get on with the meeting. So Toby Essler from Telecare, do you want to do your presentation at this time?
Sure, I'd be delighted to. Thanks, Rob.
Yeah, and do you have slides you wanted to share?
I do not. I just have my face.
Perfect.
So thanks for some time to share about our program. We go by the name TCAT, which stands for Telecare Community Alternatives Team. We are primarily a behavioral health or mental health focused program, working throughout Pierce County and working with adults, so anybody over the age of 18. Our primary focus is mental health. We're designed as a program to support about 100 individuals. At any time, off the top of my head, I would say between 20 and 25% of our roster are people that are experiencing homelessness. There are individuals that lose access to housing as a result of the impact of their symptoms, and there are also folks who are unhoused who start to develop or have mental health symptoms exacerbated because of the experience of homelessness and all the stressors that go with that. All of the work that we do is outreach work. So while we have an office building close to the Tacoma Mall, we don't have individuals that come to see the team here. The team goes out and meets with the people that we're serving wherever they are. So if they're in a structured setting, if they're inside a psychiatric hospital setting, if they're in a clean and sober house, an adult family home, their own independent living setting, a shelter, if they're currently living on the street, wherever they are, that's where we go to meet with them. Primarily, the program was designed, we've been in place for about 5 years, initially to help people transitioning out of an inpatient mental health setting. So we would go and meet with them while they're there, start to build that relationship with them, work with the discharge team on site, and then continue to work with that person for up to 90 days after they leave that inpatient setting. Our goal is to put ourselves out of a role in the sense that we have successfully connected that individual with longer term behavioral health services of their choosing. So some people are interested in the full menu in terms of case management, peer support services, medication management if they wish to use medication as part of their recovery plan. Other individuals are interested in one or two pieces of that. So we're really driven by what the individual wants to do as part of their recovery. Those referrals tend to come from those settings themselves, but we do accept referrals. Our referral door is pretty wide open. So it can come from a structured setting. It can come from the individual themselves. It can come from a friend or a family member. We do get a significant amount of referrals from the Mobile Outreach Crisis Team, from FD Cares, from the Police Co-Responders Team. I think something that we do really well is connect with other organizations and try to draw us all around an actual or a virtual table, because sometimes people are getting services from a number of different areas, but those services are pulling them in different directions. So we're trying to get a coordinated plan. The other main source of referrals for us is from hospital emergency rooms. People have arrived there as a result of a behavioral health emergent issue. They may have taken themselves there. They may have been referred there or taken there by first responders or police. Our goal is to get out there within 2 hours of that call from the emergency room. And if they're willing to work with us, we partner with the emergency room staff to help that person leave the emergency room and go back into the community rather than be referred to a behavioral health inpatient setting. Our program is entirely voluntary. As I watched some of the comments in the chat earlier, we also have that experience of reaching out to people that are not ready to accept services. So that's a challenge and a question that I think we all face. We are not a crisis team, and that's a boundary that we struggle to manage a little bit because we've grown a reputation of being extremely responsive. But we're also, as I think any organization is, trying to allocate our resources where they can be most effective. But if somebody has expressed any level of interest in working with us, we will be there. We will go out and meet with them, let them know what we do, how we can help. The program is comprised of peers, so individuals that have experienced their own behavioral health needs and accessing resources in Pierce County. We have a clinical team of master's level and licensed clinicians. We have case managers. The program also has its own psychiatric prescriber who also has the capacity to offer MAT services. So if somebody is transitioning and looking for longer term MAT services, we can try and fill that gap for them in between. Let me see. I think those are the salient points, and I want to be sensitive to time. I see an insurance question. Thank you for raising that. So we are contracted with all of the MCOs in Pierce County. So individuals that have Medicaid or Medicaid eligible. We also have a contract with Beacon, the BHASO. So if an individual doesn't have access to Medicaid, or they need coverage while we're enrolling them with Medicaid, we can serve those individuals. We can serve individuals with Medicare only through that Beacon contract. And we can also serve in the short term veterans that have the Champus insurance or folks that are connected with the tribe that may be funded through HCA on a fee-for-service basis. So pretty flexible. Private insurance is really the only piece we're not that adept at working with.
Thank you, Toby. Any other questions for Toby before we move to the next item in the agenda? Patricia.
Just the other part of that question, like the percentage, I know it's a voluntary base, but the percentage of individuals coming out of ITA involuntary treatment, is that part of your spectrum?
It is, yes. So we don't have any kind of assigned quotas, so that's flexible. But typically probably about half the individuals we're serving are coming out from an involuntary detainment.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah, I'll put the my contact information and the referral form, if I can, in the chat. And yes, we do have an encampment right around the corner from our office building. We have attempted some outreach to there. I think I'd say we're in the relationship developing phase at the moment. People are understandably cautious because there's a lot of negative attention focused on that group as well.
Thank you, Toby, and thank you for letting us know about your services and joining us this morning. And if you can drop the contact information and website in the chat, I'm sure folks will take an opportunity to look look at that information. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the invitation.
All right, so let's shift gears a little bit. And last week we had Valerie on the agenda to talk about prioritization for rental assistance going forward. And Valerie was able to rejoin us today. So Valerie, would you like to start your presentation?
Sure. Thanks for having me. If my microphone gets in a weird spot and I'm hard to understand or hear, somebody flag me in the chat and I will make sure I adjust. So I'm going to share my screen, go over some stuff that you need to know about rental assistance and about eviction prevention, which is the upcoming program, who I am. I'll do a formal introduction, and then we'll get started with some questions for everyone. So let me go to this screen. Don't you love when you have multiple screens and you have to figure out like, which one can people see? Okay, so from the beginning, Pierce County Eviction Prevention Program is the name of the permanent program that's coming online. So super exciting. First time Pierce County will have a permanent program for eviction prevention. As you may or may not know, in the community, generally, we've had very small programs like LASA and St. Vincent de Paul and St. Leo's, but not really in a mainstream resource that has been available for folks to apply to. So this is very exciting news that we are all super excited about. So who I am, my name is Valerie Almany. I have been with the county for 6 years. Previous to this, I worked in homeless programs and COVID-19 response, rental assistance. My name is Valerie Knight at the time. I chose just to confuse people. Prior to the county, I worked for a local nonprofit serving veterans in 33 counties. I have lived experience. So I'm a survivor of domestic violence, and I've also lived through homelessness with 2 small children. I think that's important because sometimes when you're doing Zooms, people don't really know you and get a sense of who you are and what you've gone through. So our words can sometimes feel very empty. So I want folks in this community, this coalition, to understand a lot of folks at the county do have some lived experience. And then my education, I am a glutton for punishment. I have a bachelor's and I'm finishing up my 3rd master's as we speak. I will graduate in December. So I finished my 2nd one last year and my 3rd one this year. Part of that is because my husband was killed in the military and I don't believe in wasting our benefits. So I am getting my 3rd master's in emergency management, which will come in very handy if we have another pandemic. So that's who I am. My name is Valerie. Call me Val if you want to. So previous funding that you've heard about for the last 37 years, which has really only been about 2.5, is the Rental Assistance Fund. So we had about $157 million. One fund source was through Washington State Department of Commerce. Then we received a direct allocation from the U.S. Department of Treasury. So both of those came to the county. We worked with a slew of amazing nonprofits. We had like 21 in 2020. We have 9 now that we're working with. The City of Tacoma also received their own funds, so that is not included in this, but they did go through our portal to be served. So just kind of give you an idea of like how large of a program we're currently working, so you have an idea of what we're going to. My comparison is constantly watermelons to cherries, because we are going to the ultimate to like, we will not have enough funds to serve everybody, which is what I need your expertise on. So the anticipated demand when we started to design the rental assistance program, this is from HUD, from the census, and I find it remarkable because it's pretty close to what we've served. 21,000 under households of under 30% area medium income we know are going to be past due on their rent, or were at that time of the census. 17,000 between 31 and 50, and 27,000 between 51 and 80, and that's just in Pierce County. So that gives us kind of an idea at that time of the census, 1, for those of us who responded, and 2, of how much folks were really struggling to pay their rent in the early 2020s, which is actually pre-COVID, believe it or not. So the data of what have we done since 2020? So we've spent 132 million. We still have 24 million remaining. That doesn't include the 2020 funding. So in all, we've spent about $154 million out into the community to landlords and tenants. We have 22,000 total applications. We do have a lot of research where people are applying for additional dollars. We have already served just over 21,000 households. There are some duplications from folks who are still impacted by COVID due to being sick. So there's some of those that are duplicates, but for the most part, it's a majority of individuals. That is a household number. So individuals, folks with families, broad range of generational housing. Like it's a whole gamut. Everyone was eligible. The City of Tacoma, last time I received an update, they served about 1,500. I'm sure that's much higher now. And the City of Lakewood served 5 through a very small fund source that they had, but all through the portal. So that's how many folks have come in and received rental assistance as of today. So your future funding and what I need your help with, we have 6 million. So that's about what we spend a month right now. So just to kind of put it in perspective, 6.3 million is what we have to go out into the community, and that's it. There is no other fund sources currently expected. No other cities have come forward in their budgets. The county hasn't done their biennium budget yet. So we have an allocation of 6.3 million. It is from the document recording fees. If you're interested in some very light reading, it's about 100 pages. It's House Bill 1277. And it's great. It's a lot of words I don't fully understand, but be prepared to Google. But it is something that has been needed and something that COVID really showed the legislation that we need a rental assistance program and can in Washington State. The thing to keep in mind is this is all counties. So all counties receive $1,277. So folks in King County will be served by King County. Folks in Thurston County will be served in Thurston County. So we will have a primary focus. I see your hand, Jay. We will have a primary focus of Pierce County residents. Jay, do you have a question?
Just a really quick one. Could the funding cap possibly be because it's the end of the year cycle, like we're entering into the last portion of this year of 2022, and hopefully next year your funding will be drastically more? Or is this just what you're anticipating to be what you see?
So this is actually more than we're anticipating. The document recording fees are lower than anticipated. So this is actually 2 years of funding, and we anticipate between 2.5 and 3 million moving forward per year. So this is what we have for our first year of grant, but it's going to go down just because people aren't buying houses, people aren't refinancing, and that's where all of these funds come from. So we anticipate it actually being lower. Yeah, I wish I had a better answer for that. So, okay. Anticipated program outcomes. So these are what we know the state has given us and what we sat down with Garrett, who I always say is the smartest person I know. And we figured out some logistics of like, what would a program look like with this amount of fund source? What do we think based on the need and what we're currently seeing? So we must fund at least 10% of that 6.3 million to a buy-in for agency. Buy-in for agency, for folks who are not aware, is an agency led by a marginalized community member, and their primary focus is serving the marginalized community. So we have a multitude of these amazing agencies. We are currently contracting with 3 for the rental assistance program. So for example, Korean Women's Association is an organization led by Pacific Islander Asian heritage, and they predominantly serve Pacific Islander Asian heritage. So they're one of our providers. They're named a buy-in for by the state. That is a state designation. So if you're interested or you think you should be designated as a buy-in for, shoot me an email. I'll put it in the chat here in a minute and I'll connect you with the state. I have no say of who is a buy-in for and who's not, but I'll be happy to introduce you to the folks who are. So at least 10% must go to buy-in for. That is not to say they can't come in for the whole 6.3 million. I encourage folks to come in for however much they feel they can spend in these 2 years. So the buy-in for is we minimum of 10%. We'll award up to 3 agencies. We anticipate with the funding availability to serve between 250 to 400 households. That may go up, that may go down. It's kind of a fluid number because this first year we're going to learn a lot. And then case management must be made available. So we have not capped our operations budgets for our nonprofits. What they will be able to do is apply for what they feel they need to serve to get the rental assistance dollars out the door and to provide that level of case management that's identified in the notice of funding availability that is currently out right now. So we do have a demographic data requirement that we have to meet. And this is based on a homeless management information system data. It is not based off the point in time count data. So just before anybody like tears into me about that, it is HMIS data. This is provided to us by the state, and this is our goal. So these are what we need to meet. And then any of the persons of color categories we need to try to excel at. So 42% white, non-Hispanic, 35% Black, African American, 13% Hispanic, 5% American Indian, Alaska Native, 4% Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander, 2% Asian, and 3% unknown or refused. And the way we're going to do this is really targeting outreach, making sure that we aren't creating internal barriers that we all know governments are famous for, and making sure that we aren't asking questions where folks don't feel comfortable applying, and that we build that community trust, right? So we know nonprofits in the community are more trusted than maybe a government entity. I think we've worked really hard to slowly change that. I have an amazing relationship with, I don't know, about 9,000 landlords at this point. And so our goal is to really make sure that they know about the program and people feel comfortable applying, as well as being accessible, making sure that we're available with 211, doing over 200 languages. We're out in the community. Last year, we did over 200 events at libraries all over the county, including the City of Tacoma, and making sure that there is any barrier that we find, we are working through it and eliminating the barrier instead of just finding the quick workaround, which we have successfully done for the last 2 years. So we'll continue that work. So program eligibility, this is the minimums that they have. We can go more strict. So if a part of your recommendation is to like make it more strict, that's fine. Make that recommendation. They must live in Pierce County. We cannot be flexible on that. Must have a lease in their name. Must be under 80% area medium income. We can go down to 30. We can go down to 50. We can go down to 70, but 80 is the highest we can serve. At risk of homelessness. So that means they must be late on their rent. At risk of eviction. We work very closely with Tacoma Pro Bono. So those folks who are being threatened with eviction, and they must be living in the unit. So we aren't able to pay rent on a future unit unless they currently have a lease in their name. So program growth, but just because I think it's important to understand how far we've come and how we continue to keep advancing. 2020, we did an online application incognito and everything was done through Excel spreadsheets. It was horribly exhausting, but successful program. Homeless kicked total butt that year. No phone option to apply. Everything was just in a portal. And there was very limited languages and accessibilities. Then we're like, that didn't really work out so well, right? Like we need to make some changes. So we did a portal with ease of application, funding, tracking, and reporting all in the same thing. 211 was added with an option of over 200 languages. We hosted multiple in-person events, and then everything is done through the portal with the amazing IT department and comms department here at the county, really giving us support. So that was awesome. Like we saw a ton of growth. We saw a lot of new applications, and really just getting the funds out the door and providing better services. And then in 2023, what we're envisioning is a more user-friendly portal, making sure tenants and landlords have more access and ease for submitting their applications, continuing that amazing relationship with 211, because I mean, 200 languages in one place, like that is unheard of. That is fantastic. Really providing intensive case management. So folks who are in need of increasing their income, folks who are rent burdened and really need to have the hard conversations about moving, all of those kind of things like childcare services, connection to behavioral health, connection to substance use, like all the things, anything that would create housing stability, because as we know, housing is healthcare. Really making sure that folks are connected is what our amazing nonprofits will do. And then relocation assistance if the household and landlord requires it. And what we mean by that is they're in a unit, let's say their rent got increased $1,200, which we have seen throughout the county, but their income's only $800. There's no way they're ever going to be able to pay that $2,000 a month rent, right? It's just not possible. That's where the case management would lead a mediation conversation about having those hard conversations of breaking the lease legally, getting them moved into a new unit, paying security and deposit of affordable units, and then really working to get them stable in their new unit while not having a past due debt with the old landlord. So our goal is to make the old landlord happy and get a new landlord at the same time. So program design is landlords can start an application, but the tenant must apply. So we do not allow just the landlord to apply, and we do not allow just the tenant. It has to be a dual conversation because we work with both entities. Communication between a landlord and tenant is imperative to housing stability. And a lot of folks get scared of talking to their landlords, and this program requires all entities to kind of break out of that shell and really have those hard conversations. So landlords can start it. It'll email the tenant to apply. A tenant can start it. It'll email the landlord to apply. We only process checks to landlords and utility companies. Other community counties do pay tenants directly. We find that also breaks down that barrier of communication. It really increases fraud. So we only pay landlords. We only had to deny 2 applications out of 21,000 processed due to that reason. And we did refer them to other community resources. And then Pierce County manages the portal. So we perform basic mostly me, but we perform basic eligibility and duplication checks. We refer to one of our amazing nonprofit providers, and they process for eligibility, collect missing documentation, and issue payments. So just so you have an idea of how it works, like just the county, we're super involved in the process and in the program, but we rely very heavily on our amazing nonprofits to complete all of the tasks. So the application process, right now, you would go to the portal, you could call 211, you could go to an in-person event. That's going to continue with the permanent program as we're discussing. The tenant, if they apply, they enter their household data and what documents they have available, photo ID, proof of residency, which is like a utility bill or a lease, household income, and then the landlord would get an email. They'll submit their W-9, lease ledger, proof of ownership, and then they would register. If the landlord starts the process first, it pings over to the tenant and vice versa. So just so you're aware of like how this works, so that if part of your recommendations is to alter this situation, like feel free to make recommendations. We have been very willing to listen to the community this entire time. We've made a lot of adjustments based on what experts in the field have seen and said and think that we can improve upon. And we are always looking to grow and improve this program so that will continue for the next hopefully many years. Partnerships, because I think you should always give public shout outs. Those 9 amazing nonprofits who I just could not say enough about, plus the 20 so that we worked with in 2020. United Way 2-in-1, the Center for Dialogue and Resolution, Tacoma Pro Bono, and I are just, if I were still going to get married in a couple of years, Tacoma Pro Bono would probably be all of my bridesmaids and best men. Landlords, because you can't do any program without them. Try to think of a single program you can do without a landlord. Utility companies and local city jurisdictions. So it has been a huge partnership. This program has done nothing but require communication and checking in and really putting your egos to the side and finding the solution. And I think that's great. We hope that continues with the design of the new program. And then, so questions for you. What I really need you to do in the breakout room, if at all possible, is really what's the best way to prioritize households, knowing that we do not have enough funds in the community to meet the need, right? 6.3 million for 2 years, about 3 million every year after that. It's going to go quick. Right now, we're averaging about 10,500 per household, and that seems to be pretty par for the course. We don't know what the new program is going to look like. So how would you prioritize to make sure that the most vulnerable folks get served? You can do a prioritization with landlords or tenants. You can do both, but really just how would you prioritize that? And then what are some other additional factors we can use for eligibility to ensure that the most vulnerable get served? Should it be previous experience of homelessness? Should it be specific, smaller landlords? Like, what does that look like to you? And what do you think we should require as an eligibility to make sure that, one, we aren't denying folks for any reason we should not be denying folks, and 2, some things that we need to make sure the most vulnerable get in and we aren't just throwing dollars at a problem, because we don't want that. So that is my slides. So Rob, I'm not sure how you do it from here.
So I did see Lavada asking the name of the program again in the chat.
Yes. Oh, sorry. I can't see the chat when I'm sharing, apparently.
That's okay.
Oh no, I pushed the button.
And we can stop your sharing. There we go.
Thank you. Okay. Yes. So let me go back up. The name of this program right now is the Rental Assistance Program. The application is closed. Lavada, I can tell you that we have served more percentages of people of color in this program than we anticipated. And we have actually excelled at every single target that we have been given by the state and Treasury. We track that number on a consistent basis weekly. Actually, we review it weekly for not only applicants, but for referrals and for acceptance into the program, as well as checks being cut, because we want to make sure that there's no barrier in any of those steps where we prevent someone of color, someone with LGBTQ status, someone, yes, the portal is closed, someone for any of those things that we want to make sure that we are receptive and culturally responsive as possible. So that is what we are really working at. But you'll go into groups in here in a minute to chat about the rest of that stuff. So yes, the portal is closed. We are going to have a new program starting January 1. So that's what you're here to discuss today. We have enough people in the portal to close out the money we have available. So we aren't accepting new applications. We'll serve probably several thousand more that we have on the list, but we will not be able to get any new people in. So then the program we're talking about now is our January 1, 2023 program.
Thank you, Valerie. So as Valerie has alluded to, we're going to go ahead and go into breakout rooms. And Our topic today is just exactly what Valerie outlined in the presentation she just finished up. I'm going to put everybody in breakout rooms of about 5 people, and if somebody could take notes and paste those into the chat when they return to this room at 10:05, that would be fantastic. And I will post the subject as an alert, but largely it's around how should the county prioritize rental assistance funds and what key factors should determine eligibility. That's the question we're going to consider. All right, so away we go. We'll see you in 10 minutes. Well, welcome back, everyone. Hopefully that was a good conversation, and I look forward to seeing what notes you dropped in the chat. We will rely on Timothy to pull together the notes from this week's chat, and so we can get those compiled for Valerie going forward. But thank you again, Valerie, for your presentation. And if anybody has any questions to follow up for Valerie, maybe she can catch them in the chat.
Yeah, I will do. I'll be here for a little bit longer. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you. So our next item in the agenda, before we get to the government updates, I wanted to carve out a little bit of time for Gerald Daniels to talk to us about how things are going with the micro shelter village that Brotherhood RISE is setting up on the Tacoma hilltop. So Gerald, would you like to give us an update?
Yeah, good morning, almost afternoon, everyone. Kind of tough to come behind Valerie. Wow, thanks, Rob. Thanks. All right, yeah, so for those that don't know, Gerald Daniels from the Brotherhood RISE Center. We're located up here on our MLK on the hilltop. And he's talking about the emergency stabilization shelter that we're doing for the city of Tacoma. We call it the Freedom Project. The purpose of the shelter is to provide crisis stabilization. Even though it's called emergency stabilization, we figure we're going to use it as crisis, right? Because anyone coming out of a street sweep, anyone coming out of an encampment or coming out of a tent, they're in a crisis, right? And we don't always look at crisis as this big, huge thing, but that's a big situation and circumstance. So we use for crisis stabilization to try to get people stabilized. We provide our social services, our social work and services with them while they're there. We're right now in the current kind of a holding path. We're going to be building 16 units to hold up to 32 individuals. It's going to have a shower facility, a laundry facility, bathroom facilities as well on site. Our facility is right across the street, so we'll be doing feeding from over here. So we'll provide them 3 meals per day. We'll be able to get them behavioral health services, social services, and mental health services as well through our programs here. We do things like driver's license. We have a adult with learning disability program that we help fill out applications if there's a job needed, if there's application for rental assistance, any applications they need, any paperwork they need, we have a program here to help them get through and also to show them and help them read through those programs. We've had some setbacks. We should have already been started, but there were some setbacks that was kind of out of our hands and the city's hands. So we've kind of been on a little slow hiatus here. The project is being built by Clover Park Technical College. They're construction students, and now they're on break, so they'll be back on the 26th. And once they get back on the 26th, we think we should have it up and running, hopefully by the 2nd week of October. So right now, everything is now back on track. We had an electrical problem or lack of electric. So they have been working with battery operated tools. And so that was kind of a slow process for them. But now we've got the electrical not plugged in yet, but it should be in by the time they get here, which will make the project go a lot faster. So again, we'll be looking to open up around the 2nd week of October. We should be serving, like I said, servicing up from 16 to 35 individuals. Very low barrier. No particular order of merit list, because we will also be getting them from the city's outreach team and then our outreach services as well. Like we said, we want to just try to provide a crisis stabilization to get them stable and moving into the next step of their lives. So pending any questions, I know it may be a question coming up about a couple of things you may have heard, but I'll let someone ask if they choose.
Thank you, Gerald. So any questions for Gerald? Oh, Lavada's asking if it's serving both men and women.
Yeah, we serve all. There's no limitation.
Thank you. And anyone else? All right. So I see Teresa has her hand up.
What kind of help do you need?
I'm sorry?
What kind of help do you need? What could anyone do to help move this along?
Well, probably not anything can be done moving along. Some of it was permitting issues that kind of slowed things up. So going through the permitting process to slow that up. But anyone that wants to volunteer help in any area, we're looking for that. We'll be looking for supplies, any type of supplies. Anyone wants to supply to the individuals that's coming in there, maybe soap, hygiene items, laundry detergent. We can purchase those things, but if anyone want to do that, that would be fine. Like part of our group, they're going to make blankets for the beds and things like that. So if anyone wants to volunteer or provide any services, we're open to whatever you want to provide.
Do you have a list of the things you need somewhere that's easy for people to see?
I can post one onto our website.
That would be perfect. I was trying to give you an opportunity to ask for help. You are so great. I love the work you're doing.
Thank you, Teresa. I knew you were proud of me.
All right, a couple more questions and then we'll move on to the next item on the agenda. Alfred.
Okay, this is intended as a kind of a get people off the streets kind of thing or whatever. But how long are we having these people stay before they're asked to move on?
Great question, Alfred. I love that question, right? So when we were asked to do this, one of the things we talked to the city about, and I had a meeting with the city manager yesterday when we went pretty well as well. We didn't want to do it in traditional fashion, right? If anyone knows anything about us, we're not traditional over here at the RISE Center. So meaning that we do everything by an individual service plan. Anyone who comes over for any service, any connection they come over for, if they're willing to do anything like want to move forward or however they want to do, whatever their choosing is, we do an individual service plan with them. And in that service plan, we put whatever those targets are and try to meet those targets. So we never put a date on anyone. You can be with the Brotherhood RISE Center for 30 days, or you can be with us for up to 24 months or longer. It depends on what your service plan is, what targets you need to make, right? Because to get someone off the street who says they want to be off the street and want to have a housing solution, well, that housing solution is their choice. We just help you to get to that goal, whatever that housing solution is, whatever those steps are you need to take, we help you get to those, and we put it into different target areas. And whenever you meet one target, we help you move to the next by your choice.
Thanks, Gerald. And Patricia, you have our last question for Gerald.
Well, it was just a comment. He was asking for hygiene supplies, and cleantheworld.org has multiple different programs where they can supply soap and hygiene, like soap, shampoo, conditioner, hygiene. There are different programs, so maybe you can get connected. Jesse came in, but that was more for hygiene stations versus the actual material. So that can save in funding for anybody. It's a CDC initiative, so it comes down from the federal level and doesn't hit any monies in our local jurisdiction. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tricia, could you put that name in the chat?
Sure. Hi, Zoe. Sure.
All right, and Ed.
Gerald, if you still don't have electricity to construct, please give me a call. I've got a generator I'll run over and you can borrow to run all your power equipment off of.
Thank you, Ed.
Yep.
We'll do so. Thank you.
All right, so thank you, Gerald, for the update. And that's great news that that your site's about to come online in another month or so. So that's fantastic. All right, so let's shift gears to our regular government updates, and then we will double back and I'll talk a little bit about the proposed camping buffer around temporary shelters. So first up, do we have anybody from the City of Tacoma on the call today? I didn't see Caleb in attendance, and I know he's not here every other Friday. So let's move on to Pierce County Human Services. Jeff?
Good morning. I'll just share that the COC routine funding opportunity, annual funding opportunity that we do annually, an application evaluation committee has come together. They have prioritized projects. There are 14 projects on that list that will be submitted to HUD by the end of this month as part of a collaborative application that we submit annually. The COC has approved this rating list and we'll be posting it to our website soon. The supplemental funding that HUD currently has available for unsheltered homelessness, I can give you an update that we received 5 applications. The application evaluation committee is reviewing and rating and evaluating those projects. They'll come together just over a week from now to create a priority list for those projects. Of those 5 applications, 4 will be considered. 1 will not be considered. It did not meet the minimum threshold review to be funded. These programs require a 25% match that must be identified in application, and the project did not have any match to provide for the project, so it's not able to be submitted to HUD for consideration. Another big project we're working on is a project with Department of Commerce and Department of Transportation at the state level. Garrett's fully engaged in this more than I am. So I'm hoping, Garrett, you take the opportunity to maybe share about what we're doing with the right-of-ways and the State Department of Commerce and Transportation on this project.
Sure. I've given some updates on this. So this is the state public right-of-way funding. It's pretty substantial, about 25 million capital and then 10 million operations for 3 years. And we are just now getting contracts from the state out to providers in the community. Funny process, pushed super hard to be fast by the governor's office and the legislature. And so the state decided to do it in a no bid process. So we helped them identify some providers. And that process is going on. Finally have a draft memorandum of understanding with the different municipalities so we can hopefully have a proper announcement of everything we're doing. But I'm excited. It's a really neat mix of shelter coupled with permanent housing programs. So rapid rehousing, permanent supportive housing, and it'll end up being about, I don't know, 200 and something households served each year in permanent housing, and around 500 households served in shelter, and prioritized by State Department of Transportation for encampments along the I-5 corridor at first. So in the I-5 public right-of-way. Yeah, it's a mix of hotel-based, tiny house village, houses, safe RV parking, some new stuff for our community and a lot of tried and true. So again, excited for that announcement when we're actually able to make it and all things are official and T's are crossed and I's are dotted. And again, it's really resources coming into our community, however, directed as to who gets them by the Washington State Department of Transportation. But that's okay, because they're resources that folks will use and it will be good.
Thank you, Garrett. We'll look forward to hearing the details when you can share them. And I know Jenny is unable to be here from the Tacoma Pierce County Health Department today. She did send me some information, but anyone else from the health department on the call that wanted to share anything critical this morning?
I'm here, Rob.
Yeah, hi, Zoe.
Hi, everyone. I don't have any big updates, but there was some really good news yesterday that I wanted to share with folks. In the last month, we've had the fewest COVID deaths since the beginning of the pandemic. So that's a great sign. We're at a really low community level right now, about where we were pre-Delta. There is a good chance that things will spike with back to school happening. But we're hoping if things do build up, it won't be quite as high as the last couple have been. The bivalent booster vaccine is available. Our team can come out to any of the shelters and do a vaccine clinic for that. I think Jenny probably sent out a little some flyers or some more education about that. One thing to note is while we've also got the monkeypox vaccine available, the time you need to wait between getting those two different vaccines is 4 weeks. So if you know people that want to get both, planning out which one you think you're more at risk for and which one you should do first is a consideration. The COVID vaccine can still be given with flu. So we're hoping to do some clinics that have both. Yeah, I think that's all I've got. Feel free to contact me or Jenny if you've got questions. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you, Zoe. And I did paste some notes from Jenny that she sent to me in email into the chat. So if you have an opportunity to read those, they are there. I'm sure there'll be more coming through email as things develop. So appreciate that and appreciate you being here, Zoe. So let's see. I also don't believe we have any update this week from the Pierce County Emergency Management folks, but let's pause for a moment just to see. All right. So thank you to all of our government partners who are here today and were patient enough to wait. We usually try to do these updates at 10, but had other content push us later today. Some of the content that I also just had bumped to the second hour of the meeting is the topic that we spent the majority of last week's meeting talking about. So let me give a little bit of a overview of where things are currently at with the City of Tacoma's proposed camping buffer ordinance. You'll recall from last week that Councilmember Hines came here and listened to a lot of our questions and comments about this proposal that would create 10 block buffers around the temporary shelter sites within the City of Tacoma. The Tacoma City Council did have a study session conversation about this proposal on Tuesday, and the way that this legislation is going to proceed is that there is a first reading of the ordinance on the agenda for the City Council this coming Tuesday. That meeting takes place at 5 p.m. and is available for in-person comment at the City Council chambers at 747 Market Street, as well as for comment made virtually over Zoom. The current timing that has been proposed is that the first reading would take place next week, and then the second and final reading could take place as early as September 27th. Let me characterize a little bit about what the presentation was during Tuesday's study session. There were a number of council members who asked clarifying questions regarding the proposal. By and large, I think if I was to count votes, I would say that there appear to be enough votes to pass this ordinance. It only takes 5 votes to pass. And there are 3 council members who are sponsoring the legislation. Just so you're aware, the ordinance number is 28831. And if it is approved, it would go into effect on Halloween. So October 31 of this year. And I will paste the link to the legislation itself on the city's website in the chat. There are council members who are asking questions about how enforceable the proposal would be. And in the conversation, the city manager let council members know that there's still severe limitations in the number of shelter spaces that are available. There's also capacity issues in terms of how many city staff and members of the HEAL team could do the outreach. So there was some expectation setting happening that that would made it clear that they would not be able to immediately move everyone outside the 10-block buffer around each of these sites. I did look at that link that I sent to you for the legislation and the county and the city council agenda earlier this morning. There are a couple of amendments that are going to be proposed. One was brought up during the study session by Council Member Bushnell to add Aspen's Court down on Hosmer as one of the sites that would have a buffer around it. That was not in the original proposal. So that would be a separate vote, whether they would consider that item. And then Councilmember Blocker is also going to make two motions regarding the misdemeanor, the potential of being charged with a misdemeanor if you're within the, oh, did they change the URL? Sorry, Jay, if they changed the URL this morning, then that might be why that's not working. I'll go look at that here shortly and I'll make sure I put the new one in there. But Councilmember Blocker is actually doing two proposals to reduce the monetary fine and or jail time that could potentially come into play if someone is charged with a misdemeanor when they are asked to move outside of a buffer area and they refuse to do so. So but what we wanted to do this morning was to encourage everyone to take a look at the legislation, to carve out the time to reach out to your city council member and or the mayor, whether you live in Tacoma or in the greater county. This is an issue that affects our entire community. If you live outside Tacoma, you probably want to send your notification and comments directly to the mayor rather than the council member who represents your area. I have put together a document that can be used as a tip sheet to reach out to your council members. And I just dropped that into the chat. It's pretty self-explanatory. It does not, it includes some potential fodder and context for talking points related to creating solutions to homelessness. It does not specifically get into a coalition position related to this proposal. And let me explain why it doesn't include that, and then we'll get right to you, Zara, with your comment. So the reason that I didn't include a direct series of talking points regarding the coalition's thoughts on this proposal is that if you will recall last week during the conversation, at the end of the conversation with Councilmember Hines, we did do a poll of those in attendance, and the folks who were in the room, about 49% of us did express that we would be opposed to this legislation, but there was not a majority. I mean, it was close to a majority, but not quite a majority of this coalition that was in attendance last Friday who said they'd be opposed to the legislation. So I didn't feel comfortable creating talking points on your behalf that stand for the entire coalition that take a stance on this, but I do encourage you to let the council know what your personal feelings are about this idea, whether there should be further amendments to how the buffers are drawn or any of those kinds of items. And that's why I created that contact tip sheet for folks to use. And I'm happy to make edits to that as well if folks have suggestions. So that's enough talking from me. Let's move on to comments from folks. And I see Zara, your name came up first, so go ahead.
Hey, so I just had a quick question. I was wondering, I was thinking about the proximity of shelters to other services that are being offered. And I was wondering if anybody had taken the time to kind of, I know that the council member had a map of where the buffer was, but I was wondering if anybody had overlaid like a map of the services that exist onto that buffer zone. Just because I think that in terms of public comment, that might be like a very salient argument, because what I suspect, not having like done the geographic overlay myself, is that your buffer zone of encampment would almost be eclipsing people out of all of the possible services that exist, which is obviously a mess. But I was just curious if anyone had done that or had taken the time to create that resource, or if I mean, I could try to put it together, but I'm not as familiar with the resource network as a lot of the people in this coalition. So that was kind
So one key element in considering that is that this legislation doesn't mean that somebody cannot be homeless and be inside the boundaries. It just means they cannot set up a tent or keep their belongings within the space. So the council conversation during study session made it pretty clear. It didn't mean it was like no people who seem to be homeless can be in these spaces. However, the practicality of it is that if you're carrying all your belongings and you're inside that space, especially the way that the boundaries are overlain, much of downtown Tacoma, where most services are centered, are within buffer zones. So it's a valid question and a valid point to make, that it would force people to stay outside of close walking distance to services that exist, and create an additional hardship. And then Anna, I see your comment in the chat about how does a homeless person pay $1,000 fine? Yeah, we've definitely made that argument. And one of the motions that Council Member Blocker is going to make is that fine be severely reduced. Include one of his motions is that on a first offense, somebody would be fined $25, and then it would graduate up to $250 for a third offense. It remains to be seen whether that motion would move forward or not. Teresa?
Just because some people weren't here last week, I thought they might have the impression that 51% of the people in the meeting were in support of that. And I wonder, there were a very small number of people who were in support of it, but there was this ambiguous place. So could you give those numbers?
Yeah, let me see here.
It definitely was not the majority of the people here saying they were in favor of this ban.
Right. I would have to go back. Maybe Garrett can recall what that breakdown was, but
29 people or 48% said no, 17 people or 28% were undecided, 10 or 16% said yes, and 5 people or 8% abstained. So if you were just to say the yes and no votes, you would have 29 no and 10 yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. Appreciate that contextual question, Teresa. And Zoe.
Yeah, I just wanted to point another thing out with this fine criminalization, all of that business. A lot of folks that end up putting themselves on the outskirts of things and are, you know, at very high risk are folks that have a deferred sentence. If you have any contact with the police for any reason while you're out on a deferred sentence, you will immediately go to jail. So yeah, I just, for folks that are going to be there on Tuesday, that puts a lot of folks who maybe got caught up on a drug charge, like a minor drug charge or shoplifting or a lot of things that we know this community is already heavily targeted for. This could just put a lot of people in prison. It doesn't have, you know, a $25 first time fine is not the only thing at stake in all of that.
Yeah, thank you, Zoe. Anyone else with comments or questions that they'd like to share with the group before we move on? All right, so again, I do urge that folks take some time this weekend, send an email to your council member and CC your at-large council members. Be sure to include the mayor on what you say. And really, there is more power in using your own words to make your own passionate argument to these folks than there is if we had the same talking points and we're sending them. So there's strategy involved in not supplying everybody with the exact same talking points. And if you do have the capacity to either attend the meeting on Tuesday or to do so on Zoom to make comment, please do. We have at least 2 more opportunities to do that, both this coming Tuesday and then when the final reading of the ordinance takes place, potentially on the 27th. So I appreciate everyone's efforts on this, and I know we have I saw and experienced a lot of passion over this issue over the last week or so. So this is an opportunity to channel it into action and really to encourage the city to create solutions for folks, because there still is not a good answer of where people can go. And that should be foremost in the question that we should be asking our elected officials, in my opinion. So let's move on to other items on the agenda. And if you have additional questions and comments, please do drop them in the chat. How about, I don't think there's anything critical we need to update right now regarding the comprehensive plan to end homelessness. I do know that the executive committee of the advisory board for the plan does meet this afternoon. But anything you think we need to bring up, Garrett? Okay. And advocacy update, I think you guys already know what the opportunity is what we just talked about. So please do exercise that muscle this week. And let's move on to an update about safe sites for all. Jan?
Thanks, Rob. And I don't know why we're so worried about the effect of criminalizing being homeless or unsheltered in this town, because criminalizing marijuana worked so well as far as the use of marijuana or any other drug. So let's use that as an example. And also, I agree with Valerie. If Garrett is king of the smartest brain in the room, I think Valerie is queen of the smartest brain in this room. She's just done amazing work. So safe sites for all. We meet Mondays, Zoom at noon. We need more sites for, we've got funding now for increasing sites for safe parking. Paula Anderson is there and gives us an update. And Paula, take it away.
Good morning, everyone. Yeah, we are full. We regularly have a little bit of a wait list. I am currently seeking, with every ounce of fervor I have a place for RVs to park. We need to come up with a solution. If you guys know of anybody who has a, I'm even looking now, I'm going to start looking at businesses that are for lease that have a parking lot to see if maybe there's something we can work there and provide services. I mean, there's all kinds of ideas, but what we really need is, as you've heard before, is we need some place for the RVs. We also have families in RVs, and you know, school districts are asking us, where can we have them park and be safe and that type of thing. So the money to create this is there. We just need to find a spot. So please, everyone, put on your thinking caps, contact me. if you, or Jan, anybody on the Safe Parking Committee, if you have any ideas on that, that would be terrific. And then just one other note, as a side note, with all the advocacy that's going on, with that discussion about the 10-block radius, all of that, I'm hearing that a couple of big encampments are going to be swept here pretty soon. The ones that are closest to Puyallup, I'm feeling like with putting those barriers up, the 10 blocks here and there is going to start pushing people out into more rural areas. Of course, you know, eventually they'll end up out there. We are seeing an increase in this, and so this is serious. And if you have free time, which I know everybody has so much of that right now, take a look at the last city council meeting for Puyallup, which was this past Tuesday, because what they are doing is trying to limit transitional and permanent supportive housing within the city limits of Puyallup in a really ridiculous way. So if you have a chance to take a look at that, there's another opportunity for advocacy there. I just don't get how these things come up, but the struggle is real. So that's all I have to say right now. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Paula. And yeah, we need to keep an eye on that and direct our advocacy to that situation as well. So appreciate the heads up. Let's see. So let's move on to any other coalition committee updates. Rosemary?
So just a couple of things. The governance committee has been working on some changes to our information on the website that might make things available to new folks a little easier. And so we have one posted, thanks to Garrett and Rob for posting it on About Us. If you go to the menu on our homepage, you'll see a document that we've created that will hopefully give you information that's in general about us and our process. And we're working on another one that would be getting involved, that will offer more specifics about the ways people can become involved in all aspects of the coalition, from the listserv to these meetings, to committees, to the specific projects, and to work that other agencies may have available for people to share in. So that's our plan. And with the racial justice, the race and equity committee, we're considering a showing of the movie Reckoning in Boston, which we could get co-sponsorships with a number of groups in Tacoma. We'll keep you posted about that. It's a really fine documentary that makes clear the intersections between race and poverty and gentrification and financialization of property. So it makes the points really well, and we'll keep you posted on that. So that's my update.
Thank you, Rosemary. And now we have some time for any good trouble announcements. Anything that folks would like to announce or share with the group. There's 53 of us in the room. Monique Brown, it's great to see you.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Okay, great. Sorry, I'm not going to be on camera this morning. I don't have that light that makes me look beautiful this morning, so I'm just going to stay off camera. So first of all, I want to say that I had no idea we've been open only since May. We have housed 15 veterans thus far, which is amazing. The other thing I want to tell you about is Fairlane Housing had asked if we wanted some folks to, Fairlane Hauling had asked if we had some folks who wanted to work temporarily. And so a couple of our guys went to work for them. They loved one so much that they hired him. And last week, they presented him with a vehicle. Wow. The group got together and thought he was so good and so proactive about getting himself together. They bought him a vehicle so that he can drive back and forth to work. And I just think that's amazing. I am no longer in the state of Washington. I think some of you know my mom has Alzheimer's and it's getting worse. So right now I'm in Los Angeles, and I think I'll be moving to Vegas, but I am going to try to hang on to Fob Hope as long as I can to get things going. And then if I can't, I will transition that over to someone else. But Please continue to support Tammy. She is doing an amazing job over there running that site. And so, you know, any support you guys can give her, I would appreciate that, and as I will support her from here. I think that is really all. Oh, no, last thing I want to say, please pass the word. We have a waiting list. We are full. We have a waiting list. And now people have been starting to drop off veterans, leave them in the street with their bags, thinking they're going to be able to get in. We have a waiting list. If somebody needs to get in, they need to contact Tammy and make sure they get on that waiting list. If they contact me, I will also make sure they get on the list. But please do not drop anybody off thinking that they're just going to be able to get in, because that's terrible. That's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you, Monique. And yeah, prayers to your mom, I see in the chat. So hopefully you're able to see the chat messages. It's great to hear from you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much.
Zoe, I see your hand up.
Hey everyone, got a couple things from Tacoma Mutual Aid Collective. One, next Thursday, the 22nd, Marlene's is going to be having another one of those conversations with local businesses, and I believe City Council, maybe even Liz Polly as well. First, I want to clarify, this is not a protest of Marlene's. They're not responsible for the things that everybody else says in that room. But the last one got really ugly. People were saying a lot of horrible things. So together with the People's Assembly, we're planning on being there to counter some of that. And then we've also heard from some of the folks at camps in the area that they want to come and speak as well. So we're going to be getting them transportation. So we're really just trying to get more people in the room that will be supportive of those speaking, that will counter some of this vitriol. I believe the meeting is at 8 a.m. Again, on the 22nd at Marlene's. The other thing, which I guess it's coming up that soon. Not tomorrow, but the next Saturday, Tacoma TMAC is going to have one of our distribution days where we provide hot food and survival supplies and kind of anything else we can. This one is going to be at Wright Park near the statues, 11 to 4. I've got a flyer for that if I can get to y'all, I would love help getting those out to the camps you serve. It's a very low-key atmosphere, so you know, we'd love to see folks if you want to come by. There's an associated supply drive that if you check our social media, we've got a wish list that's complete, as well as a few highlights. The things we try and have most are tents and tarps, and now with the weather changing, warm clothing. I will stop taking up time. Thank you all. I'll get those flyers out.
Thank you, Zoe. And Ed, your hand's up. And you're muted.
Okay, I've done this once or twice before. This Sunday, 5 o'clock at Bethlehem Baptist, we will be remembering 58 of our homeless brothers and sisters that have died in the last 3 months. So it's an open service, open to all, and we have we will be live streaming it to the Pierce County Homeless Memorials website or Facebook page, I'll get it right, and to the coalition Facebook page. So love to see all of you there. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. And if folks need those details after this meeting, you can go to pchomeless.org. The event is listed there, as well as the link to the Facebook page, or one of the Facebook page where the live stream will be located. All right, so any reflections on today's meeting? Anything that we could have done better? Anything that we should do better next week? I'd love to hear folks' thoughts. You can put them in the chat or you can raise your hand. I always just like to offer this opportunity to reflect on how the meeting has gone. And we always do want to make these meetings better. So that offer is open. I'll pause for a moment. Yes, Rosemary.
This is not so much about an idea for making the meeting better, but an invitation to people to both stay after to help plan the meeting, because we can talk about things that may have come up for you, but also to consider coming to the steering committee on Wednesday afternoons if you have the opportunity to join us at 3 o'clock, where we think about directions we should be heading and things we should encourage people to support. So that can also be about how do we share our information on this day. So welcome to any of those events.
Thank you, Rosemary. And before we close out today's meeting, we would like to offer an opportunity for some success stories to be shared. One that I wanted to go ahead and it's really not my news to share, but I did want to point out in case folks had not seen the News Tribune story about the successful effort of the folks from Home in Tacoma for All, working with those at the Meridian Estates Mobile Home Park in Puyallup. I do urge you, if you get the opportunity, to go look at the News Tribune story about the additional financial compensation that their efforts in working with the current residents of that mobile home park and the developers to negotiate a better settlement deal for all the folks living there. So they also got an extended time for people to move out. Originally, it was supposed to be next month. So I have invited Zev Cook to come talk with us next week regarding this, and she will be at the meeting next week to give a heads up about how that process happened and what success they were able to create there and what lessons can be taken forward from it. So that's a definite success story to share. A couple other hands up. Jeffrey.
Oh boy, I finally got approval from our bishops committee at All Saints Episcopal Church. We are moving ahead with safe parking at our church. So I wanted to pass that on.
Thank you, Jeffrey. And then Garrett.
I just wanted to do a thank you to everybody from the coalition that came out to help with the work party at Maureen Howard's house last Saturday. Had a good crew, Boy Scouts and coalition members, and even FOB Hope brought out some labor, some of the residents. So we did some nice stuff, and I think it really made Maureen's day and made her yard much nicer to navigate. So thanks everybody. It's fun to be part of this community.
Thank you, Garrett. And that's a great way to close out today's meeting. I want to thank everybody for being here today. Remind you again, please do advocate to the Tacoma City Council and consider showing up to make comment. I had a bird in my ear tell me that we did not have nearly as many folks making public comment about this issue during the forum earlier this week as maybe we could have. So this is our opportunity. And I do invite folks, if you have the capacity to help us plan for upcoming meetings, we will do that planning in about 5 minutes. But otherwise, if you need to depart, I definitely understand. I see Jay has her hand up before we close everything off.
Oh no, it's completely unrelated. It's about a cat. I'm fostering an animal. If you're interested about hearing about this cat and would like to also foster an animal that's absolutely adorable, little black cat, let me know, because it needs a temporary home until its homeless owner can get one for them. So please let me know. I'd appreciate it.
Thank you, Jay. And thank you again, everyone. Have a good, safe weekend, and we'll see everybody again next week.